Imagine a man sitting in the most powerful office on earth. Above him, the ceiling of the Oval Office represents the pinnacle of human hierarchy. But beneath his feet, the floor is thinning. Every signature he pens, every executive order he issues, is no longer a tool of statecraft. It is a brick in a wall. A wall meant to keep the cold iron of a prison cell at bay. Welcome to 2026. This is the year when the boundary between global geopolitics and one man's legal survival officially evaporated. We are taught to believe that presidents start wars for resources, for ideology, or for glory. But the blind spot of our era is far more primal. It is the story of a leader who cannot end a war because he cannot afford the silence of peace. For Donald Trump, peace is not a victory. Peace is a subpoena. According to the latest data from March 2026, the 47th president is currently juggling over 700 active legal challenges, ranging from the constitutional crisis of Trump v. Barbara to the unprecedented federal racketeering charges. The machinery of the American judiciary has become a relentless predator, and the presidency is the only sanctuary left. But sanctuaries require maintenance. To keep the gates of the White House locked against the Department of Justice, one needs a state of permanent emergency. One needs a monster so large that the courts dare not interfere with the commander-in-chief. That monster is Iran. In this deep dive, we aren't just looking at the headlines of the epic fury strikes in Tehran. We are looking at the macro history of the survival presidency. We will explore how the American empire's foreign policy has been hijacked by a personal survival instinct, and why, according to the chilling logic of Professor Jung Zukin, Trump is now a prisoner of his own power. If he stops the drums of war, the music stops, and when the music stops, the handcuffs come out. To understand the 2026 Iran war, you must first look at the docket of the U.S. Supreme Court in the halls of power. The case of Trump v. Barbara has become the ultimate blind spot. Nominally, it is a legal battle over Executive Order 14,160 and birthright citizenship. In reality, it is the fuse of a global explosion. By March 2026, the Trump administration has been hit by a tidal wave of litigation. From Governor Gavin Newsom's climate lawsuits in California to the fierce battle over the firing of Fed Governor Lisa Cook, the American presidency is under a judicial siege. The 14th Amendment is no longer a historical text. It has become a weapon aimed directly at the Oval Office. But here is the macro-historical twist. A president who is legally cornered at home is a president who is strategically dangerous abroad. Enter Professor Jang Zweken's chilling second prediction. 2 years ago, Jang warned that a second Trump term wouldn't just be chaotic, it would be existential. He argued that the American legal system's attempt to constrain Trump would inadvertently force Trump to seek a permanent state of exception. On February 28, 2026, that exception arrived. Operation Epic Fury was launched not at the end of failed diplomacy, but in the middle of it. While negotiators in Geneva were still discussing nuclear enrichment, the first tomahawks were already over Tehran. This wasn't just a military strike. It was a decapitation event. The death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, in the opening hours, transformed a geopolitical tension into a total war of attrition. Why launch a war when peace was on the table? Because peace is predictable. Peace allows the courts to focus on the law. But war creates the fog. In the fog of war, a president isn't just a defendant. He is a commander-in-chief during the largest regional conflict in a generation. By attacking Iran, Trump didn't just target the IRGC, he targeted the very concept of judicial oversight. He gambled that the American public, faced with black rain over Tehran and $200 a barrel oil, would prioritize national survival over constitutional technicalities. This is the Sicilian expedition of the 21st century. Like Athens sent its fleet to Sicily to solve its internal political crises, Trump has sent the Fifth Fleet to the Persian Gulf to solve his legal ones. But as Professor Jiang notes, the Iranians have been preparing for this for 20 years. They don't need to win on the battlefield. They only need to outlast the American patience. As we move into March 2026, the blind spot has shifted from the courtrooms of Washington to the waters of the Persian Gulf. Operation Epic Fury, launched on February 28th, was designed to be a short, sharp shock. The decapitation of the Iranian leadership, including the reported death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, was supposed to trigger a systemic collapse. But history is rarely so cooperative. Instead of a collapse, the world is witnessing what Professor Zhang Zuoken calls the attrition of the aura. By March 21, 2026, CENTCOM reports indicate that while the U.S. has destroyed 19 Iranian ships and nearly 2,000 targets, the Iranian retaliatory operation True Promise Ford has fundamentally altered the global economy. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a theoretical threat. It is a brutal reality. Global oil prices have shattered the $100 a barrel ceiling, with West Texas Intermediate hovering near $98, and Brent crude threatening to hit $115. For the average American, this isn't just a geopolitical headline. It is a direct tax on survival. Why is this Trump's Sicilian expedition? Because the military-industrial complex is fighting a 20th century war against a 21st century ghost. As Zhang Zuoken pointed out, the U.S. is launching million-dollar missiles to intercept $50,000 drones. This is not just a tactical imbalance, it is a financial suicide note. The Iranian strategy is simple: endurance. They have spent 20 years studying the blind spots of American hegemony. They know that the U.S. economy is currently a financial Ponzi scheme propped up by AI investments. And where does the capital for those data centers come from? The Gulf states, by threatening the existence of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Iran is targeting the literal linchpin of the American economy. If the Gulf states cannot export oil, they cannot finance the Silicon Valley AI bubble. When that bubble bursts, the domestic pressure on the Trump administration will reach a breaking point. Back in Washington, the clock is ticking toward April 1, 2026. The day oral arguments begin in Trump v. Barbara at the Supreme Court. The president is trapped in a feedback loop. He needs the war to stay in power, but the war is destroying the economic foundation of that power. We are seeing the puncturing of the aura of invincibility. For the first time since World War II, a warship, the Iranian tanker Iris Bushehr, has been interned in a neutral country. The norms of the old world are evaporating. As the black rain falls over Tehran and drones strike oil facilities in Bushehr, the question is no longer who has the bigger bomb, but who has the longer breath. Trump cannot end this war because he is a prisoner of the permanent state of exception. But, as the Sicilian expedition taught the Athenians, when you gamble the entire empire to solve a domestic ego crisis, you often end up losing both. As the calendar turns to April 1, 2026, the world's attention is split between two pillars of American power: the Supreme Court building in Washington and the Karg Island oil terminal in the Persian Gulf. In one, the oral arguments for Trump v. Barbara Begana case that will decide if the 14th Amendment still guards the threshold of American citizenship. In the other, the fires of Operation Epic Fury continue to burn, marking the most aggressive U.S. military intervention since the dawn of the century. This is the convergence Professor Zhang Zuoken warned us about. He calls it the legal military loop. To the naked eye, these are separate events. One is a matter of constitutional law, the other a matter of national security. But through the lens of macro history, they are the same struggle. Trump's executive order, 14,160, which seeks to dismantle birthright citizenship, was never just about immigration. It was an assertion of absolute executive sovereignty, a test to see if the president can rewrite the social contract by decree. But when the lower courts issued universal injunctions blocking his vision, the president reached for the only tool that historically overrides the law: war. By April 2026, the rally around the flag effect is beginning to sour. The White House recently announced that over 7,000 Iranian targets have been neutralized. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth claims the mission is laser-focused. Yet oil remains at a staggering $110 per barrel. The blind spot here is the cost of victory. As Zhang Zuoken notes, the U.S. is winning the battles but losing the system. Every tomahawk fired is a withdrawal from the Bank of American global credibility. And the creditors China and Russia are watching the balance drop. The irony is profound. Trump cannot end the war in Iran because the moment the emergency subsides, the 700 legal cases against him will move from the periphery to the center. He is quite literally outrunning the law at Mach 3. But the Iranian trap is closing. By shifting to a strategy of mutual attrition, Tehran is forcing the U.S. into a ground war. Jiang's third and most chilling prophecy is now on the table. If U.S. ground troops cross the border into Iran, the war becomes unretreatable. It will draw in Russia, it will embolden China, and it will drain the last reserves of the American Treasury. If Trump loses power, he faces a prison cell. If he keeps the war going, he faces the collapse of the petrodollar. This is the ultimate game theory nightmare. The presidency has become a golden cage, and the war is the only thing keeping the door locked. As we await the Supreme Court's decision in Trump v. Barbara, we must ask, is the American empire fighting for its interests? Or is it merely the getaway car for a leader who has nowhere else to go? As we reach the zenith of March 2026, the blind spot has become blindingly clear. We are no longer observing a standard geopolitical conflict. We are witnessing the final transformation of the American presidency into a survival mechanism. The data from the Pentagon's latest briefing on Operation Epic Fury is staggering. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth claims a 90% reduction in Iranian drone capabilities since February 28. But in the world of macro history, military statistics are often a veil for systemic decay. While the missiles fall on Tehran, the real epic fury is happening in the American wallet. Oil prices are stagnant at crisis levels, and the $166 billion in emergency tariffs recently ruled illegal by the Supreme Court has left a gaping hole in the administration's economic narrative. The convergence is here. On April 1, 2026, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments for Trump v. Barbara. This is the moment of truth for Executive Order 14,160. If the court strikes down the president's attempt to end birthright citizenship, the last ideological pillar of his permanent state of exception will crumble. This brings us back to the chilling third prophecy of Professor Zhang Zwecken. Zhang suggests that if the judicial system successfully corners Trump, the only remaining move on the chessboard is escalation. If the short, sharp shock of Operation Epic Fury fails to secure a total Iranian surrender, Trump may be forced to ask Congress for emergency war powers, powers that could, in theory, be used to suspend the very legal proceedings that threaten his freedom. We are living in a historical anomaly. For the first time, the leader of the free world is fighting a war where the primary objective isn't a treaty, but a continuance. The battlefield in Iran is a tragic distraction from the battlefield in the U.S. district courts. The lesson of macro history is that empires do not collapse because they run out of bullets. They collapse when their leaders can no longer distinguish between the national interest and their own survival. If Donald Trump wins in the Persian Gulf, he buys himself time. If he loses, or if the Iranian trap of a 21st century war of attrition succeeds, he loses everything. As the sirens of April begin to wail, ask yourself, is this the defense of a nation, or the final act of a prisoner in a golden cage? The next decade will not be defined by who has the most power, but by who can survive the truth. Next video teaser, the Silicon Collapse, why the AI bubble is the real target of the Iran war.